Welcome to Performance-Based Acquisitions Training. You've probably heard the term Performance-Based Acquisitions or PBA. Although it might seem like a relatively new concept, it's actually been around since the 1980s. But it wasn't until April 9, 1991 that the Office of Federal Procurement Policy issued Letter 91-2 that formally made performance-based acquisitions the federal government's preferred method for contracting for services. Fast forward to today, where the scope of FAR Part 37 says, this FAR Part requires the use of performance-based acquisitions for services to the maximum extent practicable. This FAR reference makes it important to all of us that are working or will be working with services to understand this concept of performance-based acquisitions. So, what is performance-based acquisition? The FAR says that performance-based acquisition is an acquisition structured around the results to be achieved as opposed to the manner by which the work is performed. And if you're thinking, there is more to it than that, you're right. Performance-based acquisition means structuring your solicitations and contracts, which include your performance work statements and quality assurance surveillance plans around the purpose of the work, which is defined in clear, specific, and objective terms with measurable outcomes. For example, we'll use the simple grounds maintenance requirement of cutting grass to demonstrate. Before performance-based acquisitions, a grass cutting performance standard might say, grass will be cut once a week. But during months of heavy rainfall, the grass would probably grow taller than you want in less than a week. Or, in months of less rainfall, the grass doesn't grow at all and doesn't need cut. But in order to meet the performance standard, and in order to be in compliance with the contractor was still required to cut the grass once a week. In performance-based acquisitions, the stated performance standard might say something closer to, grass height shall be maintained at 2 inches. That is clear, specific, objective, and measurable, right? But there's a problem. It's so specific that it overspecifies the actual needs of the government, which is to have the installation grounds to be neat and orderly. With a requirement this specific, the contractor will be cutting the grass every day because 2.1 inches in height does not meet the quality standard. This level of specificity would also increase this contract's price. So, what might be most appropriate for this performance-based acquisition would be to say something like, grass height shall be maintained between 1 and 3 inches at all times. This would meet the intent of maintaining orderly grounds. It isn't so restrictive that it drives up contract price or eliminates competition. And this statement will allow the contractor to determine his or her own process for maintaining the grass. What you should take away from this example is that, with performance-based acquisitions, requirements are defined in a way that does not overspecify the objective of the contract. Also, part of not overspecifying the objective is not telling the contractor how to accomplish the job. The contractor can decide to keep the grass trimmed between 1 and 3 inches using 2, 3, or 4 employees, and/or they can cut the grass with a riding, push, or stand-up mower. The government does not care to specify how the work is accomplished, as long as it's safe, meets laws and regulations, and keeps our grass height between 1 and 3 inches. Not overspecifying helps to limit the government's involvement in matters of how the job is performed. This conveys trust to the contractor to perform the activities necessary to produce the government's desired end result. At the same time, you may have noticed we did not underspecify the need either. We didn't just say, cut the grass, or cut the grass weekly. We defined the requirement in terms of what the government actually needs in order to fulfill that mission objective. And this should be your goal when defining performance-based acquisitions too. So, what documents do we use to define performance-based acquisitions? Well, FAR 37.601 states, performance-based acquisition shall contain 3 things. A performance work statement, PWS, measurable performance standards and a method of assessing contractor performance against performance standards, and performance incentives where appropriate. Some tools that we will use to help us achieve these 3 or 4 goals are performance work statements, quality assurance surveillance plans, work breakdown structures, performance requirement summaries, and performance incentives. And it just so happens that these are also the topics of this training section. But we're going to deliver them in a different order. The reason we are going to discuss them in this order is because each of these concepts and tools builds upon the preceding one. Starting to write the PWS and QASP first is like beginning to watch a 10-part TV series beginning at episode 5, or beginning to read a book trilogy with the second book. It's the same idea for performance-based acquisitions. Defining a requirement that is performance-based needs to start at the very beginning of dissecting the requirement down to individual tasks. This process of dissecting a requirement will help you ensure that you have all the information you need. You don't miss any of the requirement's important performance objectives, and that you create a logical flow for the requirements documents that correspond with each other appropriately. And no, This is not an easy task. But once you're able to accurately and efficiently define a requirement, it's a game changer professionally. And once you have it, and once you become proficient at defining requirements, it increases your own contract standards. Needless to say, it's a valuable and rare skill to be good at. And if that doesn't motivate you, then you'll save time and energy from understanding how to properly define performance-based acquisitions. And you'll save time and effort because you'll know what to look for when reviewing and approving them. So, now we know what this skill does for you in your career. Let's discuss the benefits of using performance-based acquisitions for the government. And then we will wrap this training session up. Value. The government pays for the results and not the efforts attempting to achieve results. Performance flexibility. The contractor can deliver the result any way they choose. This enables them to be flexible and innovative in their processes, so long as they deliver the end product or end result. Detailed processes are not necessary. This relieves the government from composing step-by-step processes instructions and conducting performance surveillances on non-essential performance functions. Promotes acquisition of commercial services. Performance-based specifications allows contractors to propose innovative and cost-efficient industry practices which are already in practice. This also promotes competition. Promotes competition. By encouraging the commercial marketplace to possess problem-solving performance techniques, the government attracts creative new potential contractors. Our goal when defining a performance-based requirement is to end up with a service contractor that provides the government with services that are better, faster, and cheaper than ever before.